If manifestation feels hard right now, if it feels heavy or frustrating, or like you're doing everything right and nothing is moving, then I want you to hear this first. It's probably not because you're bad at manifesting, and it's not because you're blocked or because you need a better technique. Very often, manifestation feels hard because people are trying to force outcomes instead of allowing a shift in who they are being, and that difference matters more than people realize. A lot of what we're taught about manifestation focuses on effort. More affirmations, more visualizing, more scripting, and more checking whether it's working. At first, it can feel empowering, like you're really and finally doing something. But over time, this often turns into pressure. You start monitoring your thoughts, correcting yourself constantly, and watching the outside world for proof. And slowly, manifestation stops feeling expansive and starts feeling like a job. Now here's the part Neville Goddard was always pointing to, even if it wasn't packaged this way. Manifestation doesn't respond to urgency, it responds to assumption. Urgency almost always lives in the nervous system, not the mind. When you're feeling urgent, your inner state is saying, I don't have this yet, I need this to happen. Something is wrong if it doesn't. Even if your words sound positive, the state underneath is still one of lack. And the state is what manifests, not the voice. The body speaks louder than words. This is why people can repeat affirmations all day long and still feel stuck, because the body doesn't feel safe yet. And when the body doesn't feel safe, it stays in control mode, trying, fixing, and pushing. But here's something that can quietly change everything. You don't chase what you already assume is normal. You don't affirm your name every morning, you don't visualize your own address, and you don't look for signs that gravity is still working. You assume these things, and because you assume them, there's no emotional charge around them. That neutrality and calmness is actually a very powerful state. Manifestation becomes difficult when it's treated like a rescue mission, when the desire feels like it has to save you and fix something, and prove something and change who you are. In those moments, the desire sits on a pedestal. And anything on a pedestal feels far away. What actually works instead is quieter, much less dramatic and much less urgent, but far more stable. It starts with identity. Not what do I want, but who am I assuming myself to be? For example, instead of asking, how do I manifest more money? A more powerful question becomes, how would I feel if having enough was just normal for me? And I don't mean, how would I act if I were a millionaire tomorrow? What I mean is, what would shift inside you if you simply trusted that you are supported? Because enough has a feeling. Enough doesn't necessarily mean luxury. It means you stop racing and stop doing mental maths all day. You stop scanning your bank balance to see whether you're allowed to relax. So ask yourself, how would you move through an ordinary Tuesday if money wasn't the thing quietly sitting in the background of your thoughts? Maybe you'd walk a little slower. Maybe your shoulders would drop. Maybe you'd stop feeling guilty about small purchases and you'd stop postponing joy for some future version of your life. Maybe that tight feeling when a letter arrives would soften. Maybe the urge to constantly check would fade. And this really matters. What wouldn't need so much emotional attention? Because in a state of lack, money occupies emotional space. It becomes a background conversation. Even when you're not consciously thinking about it, it's still there. So if enough were normal, you might stop refreshing, stop scanning for danger, and stop trying to predict problems before they appear. You'd still be responsible and you'd still pay your bills, but you wouldn't live in that squeezed, slightly urgent state. And the moment you can feel that difference, even briefly, you've found that state. And this is the work. Neville called it living in the assumption of the wish fulfilled. Not forcing belief, not pretending, but quietly occupying the inner posture of someone for whom things tend to work out. Another thing that helps is letting go of emotional micromanagement. You don't need to feel positive all the time. You don't need to correct every thought or be high vibe. You need consistency of state, not intensity. calm, repeated assumption does far more than emotional effort ever will. The version of you who already has what you want isn't thinking about it all the time. They're living, they're responding to what's in front of them, and they're not negotiating with reality. That's the state you're learning to inhabit. And if manifestation feels exhausting right now, that's often a sign you're trying to control timing instead of trusting integration. Sometimes nothing appears to be happening because the old identity is loosening and the new one hasn't settled yet. That in-between liminal space can feel quite empty, quiet, and uncomfortable. But it's not failure, it's recalibration. So, what actually works? Less checking, proving, and less urgency. What you need is more normalizing, more grounding, more allowing life to feel ordinary again. Living as though it's already decided, not dramatically, but quietly. And you definitely don't need to convince the universe. You need to let yourself settle into a new baseline. And if you take one thing from this video, let it be this. You don't need more techniques, you need less resistance, less pressure, urgency, and less self-monitoring. Manifestation becomes easy when it stops being a performance and becomes a quiet assumption. And that's something you can return to again and again.